Okay. How you doing? You all right?
Hi, Sean. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm super. Yeah, thanks for joining me on this interview podcast for Bite Size Bitcoin. Just want to let the audience know a little bit about yourself and like who you are, what you do.
Yeah, my name is Jem. It's a Turkish name. I'm the founder and CEO of Chaindeck. I guess we're going to talk more about it in detail. My background, involves a lot of moving around in the country and globally. I guess I went to high school in Turkey, which is where I got exposed to kind of a lot of the background that I need. I think to appreciate Bitcoin when I first came across it. Um, I'm talking about inflation and the economy, international remittances, and all of that. And then um, I lived in the U.S. for most of my life, in Illinois and now in Austin, Texas. So yeah, happy to be here. And by the way, Sean, congrats about your podcast and your magazine. It's really exciting to see kind of new creators and new founders kind of join the space and kind of push things along. So congrats to you too.
Oh, thanks. I actually really appreciate when people pick up on that, and it's nice to hear from someone else because it's difficult when you're doing it on your own and it's just nice to hear. But yeah, it's not about me. We're here to find out a little bit more about Chaindeck. So I'll just dive straight into it. Just can you explain the idea for Chaindeck? Where did it come from, and what specific problem you were aiming to solve for its creation?
Yeah, so a part of my background, I did a PhD in nuclear engineering, and but then I switched to other industries. But education is a big part of my interests. And when I first discovered Bitcoin, my reaction was maybe a little different because of what I mentioned. Being in Turkey, living through the Turkish government dropping 6 zeros from the currency, and that might not even make sense. Like, imagine you go buy candy for $1 million at the store, and one day the government says, well, let's make $1 million just $1 because the inflation ran up too much, right? So I kind of lived through that. My mother's actually a banker, so she was working at international banks. So I kind of appreciated a little bit of like the international remittances and kind of like all the complexities that go along with that. And when I first discovered Bitcoin, a friend of mine told me that he was using it in Silk Road.
No,
And I
nice.
explained to him, actually, a P2P currency is impossible because you got to have a centralized authority. And he was like, no, I don't think this Bitcoin thing does. And then, it was like a blur. Like I found it and I was like, oh my God, this thing is amazing from the get-go. And then the first thing I wanted to do is to tell other people. So, you can imagine me like going to my friends and saying, okay, there's this thing called Bitcoin, like it's gonna be the future because, it's money on the internet. It's like torrenting, but for money, and first of all, like I realized immediately people don't usually have a background. So you kind of got to
Mm.
start slow.
Yeah.
But even when you start slow, maybe you convince them, okay, I'll try it.
Mm.
What you say is, okay, generate a wallet. So I can send you some, we can play around, send it back and forth. Okay, step one, you download the wallet software, it opens up and it says, okay, write your backup. And people don't really have the sense of like, what do I do with these 12 words? And I like to think of it as pure information security. So in the term information security is, I think, there's different connotations in people's minds because of like IT and technology. But if you think about like, it's the securing of information, right? And as pure, and the Bitcoin wallet backup is almost as pure as you can get with information security because you have a very small amount of information, 12 words, but then you have potentially your entire net worth tied to that piece of information. So securing that is actually very, very important, right? But if you're just new, I've been talking at you for half an hour to do this Bitcoin thing, and you're like, fine, you download this app, and the app tells you 12 words. You're like, I don't know what to do with this. I'm just gonna put it on my phone. And
Mm.
then I'm like, no, like, don't put it on your phone. Don't put it on that, like, don't type it with a keyboard that you don't know, like, or, don't put it on the internet. Don't let a camera see it because that might be compromised. But also don't write it on a piece of paper and just leave it anywhere because somebody might find it and take a photo of it. And also this and that. And, there's just so many conditions. And
Mm.
I quickly realized, and I mean, this is not my original idea, but, humans, we're really very good at securing physical things, we have concepts of walls and windows and doors and locks, keys. But when it comes to securing information, we just don't really have like a lot of intuition. So people, when they were trying to set up their first wallet, they would get stuck on this step. And I was like, okay, like literally step one, we need something better to achieve, which is where it started. Then I started kind of playing around with different ideas. How do I secure this? What's a good way to secure seed phrase backups? And I started thinking, well, can this become a mass market thing? Because first I was like, well, maybe there's this complicated box where like if you put your PIN wrong, like it messages the original owner or something, and that I was like, well, that's gonna be too expensive. So my kind of customer profile in my mind was, a guy working minimum wage at McDonald's. He has roommates. He's renting. Landlord comes and goes. Roommates have friends that come and go. They throw parties. And at any point, like somebody might come to his room and maybe go through his things, and he doesn't trust that. So how can this guy afford something that's reasonably priced, but also not compromised? Which is where I started focusing on. And then I had a few false starts. I spent a lot of time on this idea of like, let me get the customer or the user to write it on a piece of glass, and if you put the wrong pin, like shatters the glass, so it's like illegible. But you need multiple copies. It was just not. There weren't a lot of good options, I guess, as I was kind of iterating until I was playing. It was COVID, and I was playing with a deck of cards in early lockdown, and I was like, oh my god, like the side of this deck of standard 52 deck of cards. When you shuffle the cards, it changes and kind of encrypts. And that was my first prototype. So I ordered the cards, from ace to king, spades to diamonds, or whatever, like a standard. Of course, you got to pay attention. In the standard deck of cards, you don't have a concept of upside down or right side up. You can rotate, 180 degrees, and it's the same. But when you think about the surface of the side of the deck, created by the thin edges of the cards, that matters, right? So I was like, okay, well, I need to point them all up, right side up, figure out a way. That was the first prototype, a deck of cards. And then I wanted to kind of expand how many possible variations or combinations, I guess maybe permutations, that can happen. So we changed it to like a square deck of cards, right? So you have 4 ways to rotate it instead of 2. And then we added much more cards. We went to 100 cards so that there's a bigger writing surface, and that's kind of how it started. Yeah.
That's cool. With the ETFs floating around everyone's mind at the moment in the Bitcoin space, it's nice and it's refreshing to see a company embracing self-custody such as Chaindeck. Just walk us through the process of setting up and using Chaindeck, how it ensures security compared to traditional methods like and metal. You mentioned that briefly before, but yeah, just walk us through that.
Yeah, so fundamentally, Chaindeck solves the possession equals access problem. So in a lot of cases, and again, if we're thinking physical security, you almost think those are the same thing. If I have possession to your gold, I also have access to kind of selling your gold or whatever it might be, right? Whereas with information, actually, that's not necessarily, doesn't have to be the same thing. And in a digital world, that's much easier to understand. Like when you send me an email, there's a server in between us, or probably many, that kind of takes that email, and they have possession of the digital email, but it's encrypted. So the server can't read what you told me in the email until I get it to my client, and my client decrypts it with my email and password. So Chaindeck specifically tries to address that problem too, right? So if you think about if you took a note on a piece of paper with your wallet backup or whatever secret information, if I have that piece of paper, even if you sealed it in an envelope, I can just break the seal, take it out, and read it. And Chaindeck tries to delay that access as much as possible. I want to just be super clear. I'm not claiming nobody can break this, especially with this AI stuff. I'm sure there's eventually there might be a way, especially if you didn't do all the best practices, which I will, I'm sure, talk about. So fundamentally, the point of Chaindeck is you write it, and then when you shuffle the cards, people can't read it until you rearrange the cards. So the whole point of all the information and all the stuff on the faces of the cards tries to get you to arrange the cards in a very specific way. And then after you shuffle, you can rearrange in that specific way whenever you want to. And of course, like every face of every card has different numbers. And we have a pin method that we recommend you use. So you basically pick a 3-digit pin number, and then with that pin, you look up like kind of the same place on each card, and there will be a different number on each card, and you arrange the cards based on those numbers. So there's, over 100 different ways just on how we printed what we printed on the cards to do that arrangement. So we have, videos and instruction sheets to explain how you can do that. However, I do want to encourage, I'll talk about like different use cases. We encourage you to kind of invent your own custom way or modify the way we recommended, because with a pin, you can presumably somebody can try all 1,000 or whatever 10,000 combinations that you could, but if you customized it, now you kind of elevated the potential ways that I could have arranged it from 1,000 to the possible number of arrangements is like ridiculously high, right? So it's a huge number. It's on our website. We did the math. I like doing the math on those things. So and so we give you that pin method, which is a very accessible method, but we also encourage you to use your own.
Yeah, I actually have the instructions with me. I have the Chaindeck here, and it sounds complicated, but once you get into the instructions, it's very, very straightforward to set up. That was my experience from it anyway. So it could have been complicated, but I don't think it is.
Awesome. And I also get feedback that it's kind of fun to do it. Like once you get into the rhythm of it, you're kind of like, you're just playing with the cards, and you have a great excuse to play with these cards. It's your money and your wealth and your backup. So it's kind of almost gamifies the process a little bit. Yeah,
you briefly talked about it not being the be all and end all of your security. It's up to the user to be responsible of how they sort of look out for the security of the Bitcoin. This is just simply a resource. What advice do you offer Chaindeck users regarding the safe storage and the handling of the deck to prevent physical theft or accidental damage?
Yeah, so I guess maybe a little background. So when I first came up with the idea, I'm an engineer, over-engineered the heck out of this. It was way too complicated. Like you look at the previous card to figure out how to put the next card, and there were these like piles you got to put them on, and because I was trying to go for this thing where when first designing it, so that even if you made one mistake, like the whole thing would turn out to be very different, like the arrangement of the cards. And then my co-founder came and she was like, we need to dial this way down and make it more and more accessible. But in the process, I never compromise on kind of the security. So a few of the things that we really cared about, and this is mostly about the pin method, is that it shouldn't be trivial to guess if you kind of figure out the arrangement. Like if the person couldn't shuffle it well, for example, and you have maybe 4 cards back to back, that's correct. You should be able to back out the pin and then kind of get the rest. It should be really random. So it ended up being I think 1,000 or 2,000 lines of Python code to generate these random numbers for each, because there's a bunch of things like you don't want collisions, you don't want the same number on the 2 cards for the same pin, and there's a bunch of other security things that we put in that it's on our blog, but you don't want repeats, you don't want if you know the method, there's a lookup table, so each column and row doesn't have any empties. And if you think about the flip of the cards, each pin corresponds to a 50-50 random flip. So it's not like there's never a case where it's only 80% one face and 20% the other face and so on. We also tested plastic cards of different thickness and different cardstock of different thickness
Mm.
with different types of pens. So there's a lot of combinations. I almost like wrote this like lab report on. So we kind of like wrote different pens on different types of decks, and then we kind of put them through a bunch of abuse. Like trying to scratch them, get them wet, try to rub them off with my finger, and plastic really fails in that area, or any metal or anything that's not absorbent of the ink. Because if the ink is just on the surface, it just kind of makes it easier to just rub off accidentally. And actually, a lot of information from national archives or libraries on like how do I keep information on the books not rotting was very relevant to us. Like what kind of ink to use, what to suggest. And something else that we realized, which is actually a funny story about how the company's branding came about. Sometimes there's like ink splashes on like if this is the card, like you try to write here, but there's a splash that happens on the edge of the card that's visible. And I realized, well, you could kind of almost mash the splashes on two cards and kind of figure out how. I was like, well, okay, they need black borders, right? So that those splashes aren't visible. And so the cards had to have black borders, and then I had kind of made a white background. And again, my designer, co-founder, she was like, okay, well, cards got to be black then, because I don't want to just like ugly thick black border on every card. So now the background is black, and then therefore the branding of the company kind of became black, because ink is black.
Wow.
So it's one of those like kind of security features that we thought of, that is not too obvious, but if you kind of try with a different color background or border, you're going to kind of find out. So again, yeah, we tested a lot of different ways, and we came up with the current design to be like this perfect compromise between, it's fun to do, it doesn't take too long, like it would, I did this too many times. I expect like a typical user to have to do this like 4 or 5 times, putting cards in arrangement. But I probably did it over 20, 30 times, probably even more now. I can do it in like 10, 15 minutes. A brand new user who hasn't read the instructions, who's reading and doing it, probably takes like 40 plus minutes. My father-in-law, he didn't have his glasses. He had to kind of look at each card closely, and even him, like he did it in 50 minutes, right? So, and that's the first time. So that was the compromise. But there's still more that the more sophisticated user can use. So I guess maybe taking a step back also, Chaindeck isn't intended for the first time you're introduced to Bitcoin, first wallet, like, oh my God, just write it on a piece of paper, okay. But once you have once you start having money that's kind of worthwhile to you in that wallet, and you're switching over to Bitcoin, and this is kind of part of your investments or your retirement strategy or whatever it might be, and the importance of that wallet is growing, is where the Chaindeck and the elevated security would come in. For example, it's just like how you wouldn't start with a hardware wallet immediately, probably. You would get a simple phone wallet or custodial wallet even. You would slowly upgrade. So Chaindeck is kind of somewhere along that journey to really make sleep easy about your backup, and you can have multiple copies. So, but then we also recommend a few best practices on how to secure the Chaindeck in your seed phrase even more. So one, as I mentioned, is the custom method. There's a lot of random numbers on the cards. Like there's infinitely many ways that you can come up with on how to arrange these cards in a specific order. That's not picking a pin and following the instructions. And we highly recommend you do that. I don't want to tell you what to do, because then any attacker would probably try everything the founder suggested. So I'm kind of hesitant to even make any recommendations on what it might be, so that there's not like obvious ways to customize. Really eliminates the way of I'm going to try all the pins. I'm going to spend 2 days and I'm going to do it. If we did the math on how long it would take about 40 hours of nonstop arranging cards to try half the pins. So if you use the pin method, you get about 2 days of delay. But then if you use a custom method, then the solution, the attack vector, is mostly solving it like a puzzle, right? Like a jigsaw puzzle. Oh, okay, try to match the symbols. Which, by the way, was another reason why we settled on the thickness of the cards that we did. Because if the cards are too thick, then it's easier to kind of see where the in like the characters are like happening, and it's slightly easier to match. So the thinner it is, the better. But they look more flimsy, and they like it looks cheaper, or it feels cheaper in your hand if it's too thin. So we kind of tried to hit the perfect spot there. But we also recommend, so you arrange your cards in the specific order. You wrote your seed phrase into the side, one or two, probably there's 4 sides, right? But 1 or 2 is typically enough. And then you shuffle the deck, the cards, and you'll notice that there's a lot of empty space. There'd be a lot of empty space. And there's nothing stopping you in putting in a second backup that's just not real. That's a decoy backup. In a shuffle that you don't know how to come back to. And then you can shuffle it. And in fact, even in the second time, you'll have even more, you will still have some free space. So you can even fill those in, and then you shuffle it again. And of course, you should probably put it back to your original orientation to make sure you didn't like override anything of the original backup. But that's what we call false markings, which makes attacking Chaindeck and trying to solve it like a jigsaw puzzle very, very difficult. Because imagine like you build a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, you're 500 pieces in, and you realize, oh, this is not the right arrangement. Like, this is not the pattern I'm trying to solve. I need to just like start from scratch and not do this again, right? Like, that's the situation that false markings cause, which I think really elevates the security and makes it very, very difficult to quickly attack. Another way, which again, I practice, is to separate the deck. So you don't have to store all the cards all together in the same place. You can easily divide it up into multiple places in your home, even in different locations. And then if somebody finds just one part of it, now it's even many orders of magnitude harder to figure it out because you don't have all the cards, right? So like even if you're not going to have continuous lines probably in what you're seeing, and it's just going to make it much harder. And if you want to go even beyond, you can combine multiple decks, have a lot of false markings. You could even start with, a fake pin, do a fake arrangement as like a under attack, like I'm under duress arrangement, and then do a real arrangement, and with more decks, you would have more space to kind of do all of those games. So those are some of the ways on how to make it harder for somebody who has possession of the chain deck, harder to get to the seed phrase. But there's also, best practices on how you should store the chain deck, your chain decks. So obviously paper is not fireproof. Although I haven't met a single person whose house burned down in my whole life. It's you should have a fireproof safe if you and you should put like your passport and other important documents in that safe. Like this is not just for Chaindeck, right? And you should probably also put the Chaindeck in there. And also watch out for humidity. Humidity is usually the worst enemy in these. But that's why we didn't actually do a metal box, because we don't want to trap the humidity in there. So it's a paper box so that it kind of like mitigates that problem a little bit. And then don't talk about too much either about your chain deck. I guess that's the worst thing a company founder could say about their company. Don't talk about my company. But it's best practice, I think, to kind of be less forthcoming about all the things they're doing. So those are our top recommendations for how to use Chaindeck.
From that explanation, it's fair to say that it wasn't by accident. There's been a lot of rigorous attention to making sure it works from the material. I didn't expect you to be writing lines of code to figure out the security of it. How long did it take you to get to this stage? How long is it taking you to get with all that testing? How long is it taking you to get here?
Yeah, it took over 2 years of just developing and dabbling to like kind of come to a place where I was like, okay, this is the way. And I'll kind of share, I kind of model some brands that are not in the crypto space with this company. So I self-funded Chaindeck from beginning. I don't have any investors, so I don't have to answer to any investors and compromise on any security or design principles, as well as sales and marketing and those principles as well. And one of the brands that I kind of looked up to when I was thinking about this is like the big pen, right?
Ah,
Because it's so unique. Like when you think of a pen, right, you kind of think of that. And the other one, and this might not be relatable to a lot of people, but if you like cooking and if you like making pasta, there's like a brand of pasta maker that's like the brand. Like if you're gonna go buy a pasta maker, like it's that brand. It's like Atlas, whatever, that you go buy. It's like kind of a niche product, but there's like a one, and it's a good quality. It's a little expensive, but it's like it is the go-to one. Even like a professional restaurant will have it, and even a small, Italian mom or grandma will have it, right? And I wanted Chaindeck to be like that, like a lasting brand that it's kind of reliable. So that's how I kind of guided the process. We didn't rush anything. We weren't trying to pay back our investors and show revenue early on. We did a lot of prototypes, reached out to way too many printers, print shops, tried to get it made in the US, but turned out it's just not very feasible at this stage. But yeah, so we took it very slow and steady to kind of agree on something that like would last. Because I was thinking, if once I sell it for the first time and somebody spends the 1 or 2 hours to set it up and then kind of make sure it works and put it away and securely store it, I don't want to come back and be like, oh, actually I have a better one. Not do it again. Right? Like here's a new one, right? Like so, I just really want it to be like settled and like tested. So there's probably a 6-month period where I sent it to like friends and family, and got the feedback kind of reiterated. And then by the time we got to version 1, I think I had like prototype 8. So from prototype 8, I birthed version 1. So it's been a long process, but I'm really proud of it, honestly. Yeah.
it should be. It should be. It doesn't rely as such on any digital components, does it? So how do you envision it fitting into the broader ecosystem of Bitcoin security tools? Like you have this seed stamps and stuff like that. How do you fit? How does this fit into the ecosystem?
Yeah, so I see it as like a replacement of the stamped metal solutions, because again, I have a fire waterproof safe. I'm not really concerned about being like damaged from fire or water. And with the metal storage, my intuition is to go hide it in the woods. But what if a random hiker comes across it, right? Like I can't sleep easy, right? Like kind of thinking about that. And so this is Chaindeck comes in, I think, even like not even thinking about Bitcoin and altcoins and wallet backup. We kind of envisioned a few different use cases. For example, I have a password manager. The password manager, backs up via email or whatever, but ultimately they have like a recovery kit, and inside the recovery kit, ultimately there are, guess what? 12 words, right? Like, so we kind of envisioned a bunch of different use cases that can go with this, but let's just focus on the hardware wallet, or actually any Bitcoin wallet. It could be a software wallet backup use case. I think if this is like your HODL stack, right? It's kind of you should probably set it up once, or this is kind of things that you do once or twice in your life, right? Like, I mean, just thinking about like me and my wife, like when we got married, like we set up our joint bank accounts, and like we kind of spent maybe a few hours talking about, okay, our paychecks going here, and then we'll do this, and then okay, I'll, like, so we kind of like did that arrangement. Well, you did that kind of once, right, in your life. You don't like every year. You don't go, okay, how about our bank account and how does the money flow? Like, you don't think about that again. This is kind of like that. Like, ideally you set up a hardware wallet for your main stack, and this is the backup of that, right? So you have your wallet. Like, the intention isn't to kind of use Chaindeck daily or weekly or monthly, right? It's when there's an emergency, when the machine breaks or when you lose the thing or something happens, you kind of recover it from this. So I think it comes in at a very specific point when information security is important, and then it can kind of give you peace that even if the landlord comes and goes through your your stuff, and they can't just have a picture of your backup and go figure it out later, right? So
Yeah, that's a good point, Grace, actually. For me, the seed stamping the metal stamps, they seem a bit archaic and a bit clunky. This product, it seems a bit more modern and a bit more what's the word I'm looking for? Like it feels a bit more. It's like it's yours. It's not a chunk of metal. Do you know what I mean? It feels like it's a piece of yours. Is there anything else that you're going to be bringing out to complement the product?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess there's a few projects that we're kind of cooking up. So one thing is when you buy it, we gift you a few security seals. So you can, and you showed the box, but the box kind of opens like this. And if you think about it, you can put a seal onto the edge. And this is like a tamper-evident seals, like when somebody breaks it, it leaves a mark. And that came about because when we were early on testing and I showed it to a friend, he was like, "Can I have 3? Because I have 3 kids and, I'm going to like make one wallet for each." And I can't remember which way he was saying it, but I think each kid gets their pin, but a lawyer keeps the decks. So the lawyer is like, you make sure the lawyer doesn't open the deck,
Is this like multi-sig? It's similar.
almost like multi-sig. Yeah. Somebody has the pin, somebody has access to the encrypted information, right?
Yeah.
Which is sealed, and you can't like try to brute force it because you will break the seal, and presumably he's asking the lawyer to show the unbroken seals yearly or whatever it might be. So it was kind of an inheritance use case. But it's also a use case of the seals come from I don't want anybody to tamper with it, and if they did, I want to know. But with the seal, you got to go check to make sure nobody tampered. So one of a feedback that I got pretty common was like, could it come in a box that like emails me if somebody's trying to access it, so that because they're telling me like, okay, you're saying it delays access, but when do I know the clock starts? So they're like, okay, well, maybe we can make this really fancy box that, whenever somebody picks it up and tries to like jam it open, it like sounds the alarm and sends an email to you or SMS or whatever.
Like a smart.
So that's literally what we're calling it. Yeah, smart box for Chaindeck.
Oh, that went planned, by the way. That was a plan, but it sounded.
Yeah. So and while we're at it, we might as well make it maybe fireproof and waterproof. So it's like it's safe on its own. I just don't know if I don't know if we can find the right price point for this because of the solutions I mentioned before, like put into a safe, at your home, and so on. But that's one of the ways we want to take it. The other way, which I haven't mentioned, but this was one of the ways that I was thinking about the problem when I first came up with Chaindeck is like, the bank security deposit boxes. I was like, what if there was like a specific one just for like your Bitcoin wallet? And then I was like, well, what if like authorities come and demand like they access? How could you destroy those backups? And that's where actually they should write it on a piece of glass, and then the operator could hit a button and like smash all the glass, and all the backups are gone. Presumably, all the customers have different backups. Use case. Where we want to potentially take it is a physical location, like a secure lockbox, where we store your Chaindeck for you, and then we identify you via biometrics that are as analog as possible. So we kind of want to like this like the idea of like a security deposit box that identifies you via your body versus your identity, government identity. But there could also be an inheritance component, because I just want to go back to that because there's a lot of people who are saying this could help me a lot with my children. If I die, like how would I pass it on, and so on. So
just after that, the biometric part, would that be in a physical location owned by Chaindeck, or would you
yeah, that's the plan.
Yeah.
And like my my wife does bio research, and so she's like, she runs the DNA samples and whatever is an RNA and other things, and so there's these like conversations we have. I'm like, okay, what if you couldn't use any computers? How would you identify me, right? Like, and how quickly could you do that? And what information would you need to store to later and years later if identify me? Would that be reliable? Like, kind of pushing her about like all these questions, because I think I'm fascinated by the analog security of information, right? Like, because it's like it's digital stuff, right? Like we're talking about hardware wallets, we're talking about the backup seed phrase, which is almost like digital because it's 12 words. You can digitize it, you can encrypt it later. But how do I encrypt it? Without any computers, without an internet, without any bits and bytes. So that's where this kind of came about. So to make it like impossible by design to hack. So we kind of brainstormed a few ideas like that. It's a fun exercise, but I don't know if we'll ever get there. If there's a market, I think this will be like a service for the ultra rich, probably. And I don't think I care too much about that at this point. I care more about the African farmer transacting with the Russian whoever, also the Japanese person also doing the intermediary or whatever, right? Like so, I care more about the global economy and kind of what Bitcoin enables. So self-custody there, I think I should maybe specify self-custody for the masses and not just self-custody for those who have the time and place to afford to do it.
That's interesting. You briefly touched on feedback just on the last answer. Just go into that and just like what's been the most informative bit of feedback you've had, like almost surprising bit of feedback, and how's it influenced changes or improvements in your product?
So one of the first most useful feedbacks, I had a friend who came to visit Austin here, and he was staying with me, and that's when I was like in my first prototypes with the complicated method. And I sat him down. I was like, okay, I have this idea, and he and I like talking about startups a lot. We know each other from grad school, and I was explaining, okay, like here's the instruction. So I started explaining him, and probably like a minute into it, he was like, yeah, I'm done. This is way too complicated, dude. Like he was just like, I don't even want to listen to the instructions.
This is a common theme. This is a common theme. This is a common theme.
He was like, can it be simpler? Like maybe there's just 4 numbers on it and I pick one of the corners or something. I was like, well, that's just too trivial to try all combinations. Okay, I'll go back to the drawing board. Like, I'll come up with something better. So that was before the Python code. So then I kind of was like, okay, like it has to be much simpler. Yeah, it's basically you just got to look up the same point in every card and there's a different number. Like that's how I came to that. To that point. The next feedback was when my co-founder joined and I sent her like my design, and I used design in a very loose sense, and no offense to any designer, like it was just an engineer like drawing things up with no sense of aesthetics. And she was like, okay, what is necessary here? What is, like I was like, oh, you need the black border. She was like, okay, well, then the card needs to be black. I'm not going to have to do any black border. So then, like all these, and I was like, I had to pick colors, 4 colors for for that's safe for different types of color blindness. And she was like, actually, like these colors are really ugly. And she was like, well, most colorblind people like there's different types of it. I don't know too much, but she was like, well, these kinds of colorblind people can wear these kind of glasses and see these colors. So you actually don't need, so they can just wear the glasses. I was like, okay, fine. You can change the colors, because the colorblind can wear the glass, I guess, and they should have that, I guess. There's like a bunch of iterations like that on design compromises, which made it look way prettier, which was very good. And then we opened our doors. The first sale was actually somebody paid with Bitcoin. I was really happy. And then the next few sales, people were buying like 2 or 3. And honestly, like, so this is my shipping box. And it's meant for 1 deck, because I was thinking like myself, and most people I asked to use like are individuals, have one wallet probably, or maybe a phone wallet that they don't care about, like a checking account and a saving account, methodology. And I'm like, why the heck are these people buying like 3? It was the inheritance use case, and like, they want to gift one to a friend, and they want one for themselves, or in the inheritance use case, they're gifting the backup inside the Chaindeck. They're not necessarily gifting the Chaindeck, right? Like, oh, like happy birthday, nephew, happy 12th birthday. Like here's the Chaindeck. Like when you're older, like put this together and access to Bitcoin. And in the meantime, like nobody can just like quickly steal it, right? Like, so that's kind of the. There were some use cases like that, which is. I realized like I need to have a bundle. So that's what we're working on to kind of just kind of see what makes sense for us to kind of sell in bundles also. People wanting more than one. And I just mentioned combining bets if you're really into it, right? So then that would be having a bundle is, I think, going to be useful for a lot of our customers. And finally, the inheritance use case, I've just been thinking about kind of legal systems and how can I kind of sell like a kit for inheritance, maybe with like kind of like legal guidance. But unfortunately, like I'm not a lawyer, and especially in the U.S., I like every state has a slightly different way of doing things, and I don't want to get into the legal responsibility area yet, but we do want to kind of have like an inheritance focused solution, because most people are interested in that as well. So those were some of the top feedback. Actually, I'll also say, and I was so happy you kind of hinted on this too. I was really worried, like, oh, this thing takes half an hour to set up. Like, is it too long? And I almost had nobody tell me this is taking too long and it's boring. Like, people kind of seem to enjoy putting it together and don't seem to mind too much about the time. And again, because this is something you do once or twice in your life, I guess people don't also mind. Like, it's not like you're committing to doing this every time you use Bitcoin or something. So it was kind of encouraging to hear people like kind of have fun with it. One thing that I never heard, and this is the nerd in me that thought that this was going to be a use case, was like sending secret messages to like people, you know, like, hey, like, will you go out with me? You know, here's a Chaindeck, you know, like, no, yeah, nobody's doing that, but you're welcome to.
No, that could be a fun introductory way to younger people, I guess, when they're just like playing around with it. Yeah. So what's in the future for Chaindeck? Just tell us. Have you got anything exclusive that you're working on now?
Yeah. So right now, unfortunately, we're only in the U.S. Due to like kind of logistical challenges. So we first of all want to expand. You know, all of these things that I mentioned went into of Chaindeck. You know, all these design things and thousands of lines of Python to get the thing just right. All the tests and everything we did. The box is as good as it can be. The carbon quality, like everything is just like max stats. Anything I could max, I maxed for this like Chaindeck original. But I mean, I mentioned, you know, the African farmer, right? Like we need. I think I need a more mass market, maybe a little bit more approachable solution in terms of price and distribution. So as we kind of like start kind of bringing more revenue, get more brand recognition, and so I want to kind of almost based on market, maybe donate or, you know, sell at cost or, you know, gift as much as possible to kind of make self-custody more approachable for everybody, because that's really ultimately like I'm a Bitcoiner. I'm wearing my Coin Center T-shirt because I donated to them, I think in 2014, and they sent this T-shirt for free. So I've been like into the industry for a long time. I truly believe in like the invention of money working for like efficiencies and like organizing humans. And when you mess with the money, you kind of mess with a lot of different things, and there's a lot of cascading effects that happen. I'm sure like the audience here will probably appreciate all of that. I'm not the expert to kind of talk about inflation and all the other things.
But anyway, don't worry, there's enough of them already. So
yes, exactly. So my goal is like, how do I make this approachable, self-custody approachable? How do I solve, literally in my mind, the first roadblock when you're setting up a wallet? You know, where do I put this freaking key, and what do I do with it, and you know, all the conditions that go around it. So that's been my motivation, and it continues to be. So as much as I can help with more people having self-custody and not the ETFs, I just want to plug that in, by the way. You know, ETFs have, you know, fees, and effectively when you buy, you know, the ETF worth $1,000, let's say, and it's like a 1%, or that's not 1%, but 0.5% management fee. You're selling 0.5% every year, right? Like you're saying, I'm going to buy this so you can sell, right, to the ETF manager, which is not the ideal way of doing things. So more people self-custody, and I mean, you know, with all of the exchanges going under and people losing their money, they should just stay. If they had self-custody, you know, the whole point of Bitcoin is you don't have to trust the organization. So when you're financially impacted because it, you know, exchange went down, wish you would have self-custodied, right? Right. So to kind of protect people as much as possible is the motivation and where we want to go in the future.
Yeah, that's the message we're trying to receive. And with the magazine as well, there's a certain conference going on at the moment in Nashville, and I think there's going to be a lot about promotion of tools that are available that don't necessarily focus on self-custody. So, like I said, I mentioned this at the beginning, it's very refreshing to see companies like yourself working on it. So that's all I've got for you, Champ. Where can people find you? Where's the products? Tell us and where you are as well. Let us know.
Yeah, I'm in Austin, Texas. The company is also based here. We're Chaindeck.xyz. You can find us there. A lot of the companies like Amazon and Etsy and eBay take a lot of commission, and we're not really ready to kind of pay them 15-20% of our sales to kind of get on their platforms. So that's another self-custody decentralization or not using institutions play. But you can come pay in Bitcoin, and I actually use Blockonomics, and I guess I'll do a shout out for them. They have a payment processing system where when you pay to buy a Chaindeck, you actually send the Bitcoin directly to our wallet, our company wallet. And then we have to pay them a commission later, but we have to initiate that payment. So we actually self-custody our payments immediately. So that's another, I guess, a plug for them. But I think there's still solutions to be had with better payment processing online. But yeah, we're on Chaindeck.xyz. You can find us there. We have social accounts, but we're not very active yet. But as we kind of ramp up, I think we will be.
Okay, do you want to look them or you're not with the socials?
Yeah. I think website is the way to go. You'll find most information there. Yeah, I'm also a little averse of social media also.
Good. That's good. And that's not something you see very often.
Yeah, but I mean, this is all from my philosophy of the brand of like, this is like how I think, how I envisioned good companies should operate. For example, we give our price, and that includes shipping and tax. Like, there's no more ad. Like, and I guess you're not in the U.S. as much, so maybe you don't appreciate the annoyances of like, buying something off the shelf in the grocery store for $10, and then you go to the cash register, and then it's $11 because of tax, right? Like, it's like, oh my God, just add the freaking tax.
Yeah.
So we kind of try to follow all those practices after.
But there you go. Jem, thanks very much for this insightful conversation, and yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you, Sean. This was a great time talking to you.
Cheers.
Thank you.